Welcome to an exciting time. We're going to hear a profile of an entrepreneur, someone who, with her brother, pitched in the very first Asbury Project competition. And I want you, as she's talking, think through some of the characteristics of entrepreneurs and what it takes to come up with new ideas. Because an entrepreneur is someone who sees the same thing as others, but thinks different thoughts. So you see the same thing as other people, like a problem, but you start to think other thoughts, like an opportunity. And Emily grew up in Ghana, West Africa. So at the age of 1.5, she and her parents, which, by the way, I'm her dad, and there's my lovely wife, Pam. You want to raise your hand? Yeah. Took her to Ghana, West Africa. We were missionaries in a rural area with no electricity, and you dig a well to get water, and there's a language not written down. And that's the milieu that she grew up in, which is often an awesome place to incubate new ideas. Because when you integrate two different cultures, you start to incubate new thoughts. But I think what you'll find is this kind of can-do attitude, that whatever happens, you're going to make it work. So Emily, let me see, in Africa, we were there for 9 years before we came back home. She started a little business, and she'll probably tell us a little bit about it. Even in Africa, where there's not a lot of like extra cash running around, she found a way to make some profit through a business, and she may tell you about that. We come back home, and we came here, and she's living in Jessamine County at that time. One of her teachers is actually here from 6th grade, Ms. Barnhart. And Emily just had this kind of can-do attitude, like, we're going to make this work. So when we go to South Dakota, she's a junior in high school, and she says, you know what, Dad, I think I'm going to try out or put my name up for student council. I said, well, Emily, you know, like when I was a kid, that was more like a popularity contest, and this is your first year at this school. It may not be the best idea, but she kind of had this can-do attitude, like, I'm going to try it. Like, why not? So here's what she did. Here's her speech. And if just kind of role play with me for a second. Like, everybody stand up. And she asked everybody to stand up, and she said this: if you like it when you have a different approach or a different perspective and nobody listens to you, you can sit down. And if you like it when you have something you know needs to be changed, and you want to get a voice to the student council and nobody listens to you, you can sit down. Everybody standing up, I want you to vote for me, because I lived in a different country, and I know what it feels like to be the outsider. And if you want your outside voice to get into the inside of the student council, vote for me. Thank you, Emily Moon. You can sit down. So guess what happened? She was on the student council that year, man. And then she grows up a little bit more, goes to University of Missouri, and calls home one day and says, well, they have this student council election again, and there's, I don't know how many, 30,000 students or so, something like that, University of Missouri. She decides to run for vice president. And I was like, well, you know, you're not really from Missouri, and, you know, we're in South Dakota, but she just has this can-do attitude, and it turns out she does get elected vice president, University of Missouri. So when she later comes to me and says, I have this idea for a business, and I can't get these women out of my mind, these women that were either in sex trafficking or coming out of it or preventing them from getting into it. With this can-do attitude, I stopped doubting. I started to say, let's try it. So it's just a blessing to have Emily with us. I think as Chuck was talking the other day about these social entrepreneurs, that they have like a heart for God, a heart for ministry, but a head for business, I thought of Emily. This is a gal who has a heart for God, a head for ministry, and about 90% of the discussions we have around our house are about those two things, either ministry, church, etc., or her business, by grace, etc. So we're so proud to have Emily with us. She's a part of this Asbury project. Will you welcome her to the stand?
All right. Is this on? Good? All right, well, thank you guys so much for having me. It's incredible to be back here, and I thank you, Dad, for that, for those words. That was very encouraging. And the thing I love about God is that He makes a way where there is no way, and He is a way maker. And I have seen that in my life so many times. When there's no way that we should have won or that I should have gotten that, but wherever God's breath is there's life, and He can do things that we can't. And so, man, I just love God. He's amazing, you guys. He's the best. So thank you for having me here. Like my dad said, we were one of the first people to compete in the Asbury project, and we are still going. And I am thankful for a school, and I'm thankful for teachers and faculty that not just believe in their students, but they put their money where their heart is, and they donate to their students, and they run this competition to really say, we believe in you guys, and we want to encourage that. So I'm thankful for the gift that we got from Asbury at that time, and I'm excited to share with you guys about By Grace and what that is. So By Grace is a 501c3. We are a nonprofit, and our philosophy is that we are empowering women through education and enterprise. Enterprise, not aid, is the solution to conquering global poverty. Every social need is a business opportunity. And in areas of extreme poverty, there exist beautiful women and very, very talented women, as well as incredible materials as well. Consider this quote: "You are stuck in a hole in a village with all of your skills and all of your talents, and that's just, unfortunately, the way it is. The people here are not stupid. They're just disconnected from global trade." A Ghanaian entrepreneur said this in The Poverty Cure, and it stuck with me since that time. Because I think it's easy to look at a culture or a community that is ravaged by poverty and to only see the poverty. And with By Grace, and as the people of God, we are called to look at a community and see the beauty. Let's find the beauty, and let's draw that to the service, and let's draw that to the attention. Brilliance and beauty are equally distributed across the world. It's resources and access to capital that are not. The problem, and you'll find these are really just symptoms of global poverty. You will find these in every culture. You'll find them in Kentucky. You'll find them in Kansas City, where I live now. These are symptoms of what happens when a society is suffering from poverty. Limited access to technology, lack of education, unsafe working conditions, and then women, you will always find, are abused. So the solution, this is By Grace what we believe. We educate the women, we employ them, that empowers them, and then we elevate them to stop the cycle of generational poverty. So first, we sponsor the women's education to learn a trade skill. If she can't afford it, that's a barrier to her getting educated. And so we remove that barrier so that she is allowed and she can participate in that. Second, we employ the women to make the products. And this is essential because I think it's very easy to walk into a community and give out money and then walk away. But employment means that you have to invest in that community. And that's the difficult thing, it's the hard thing, but it's the right thing to do because it's sustainable. And I have seen how employment can light up a woman and restore dignity. I have seen it in a woman's eyes, and it is extremely powerful. God, is that you? Okay. I love you too. Sell these, okay, and then finally we sell these goods to the American consumer via our online store. So that's our method, and that is how we approach it. And here's the reality of the situation. By Grace works in 3 areas: Ghana, India, and South Dakota. Recently, we just launched our South Dakota branch last weekend, which I am so fired up about and can't wait to tell you guys more about it. But in Ghana, the alternative to being a seamstress is you become a human mule, and you are carrying loads on your head for maybe 9 hours a day, and you make next to nothing. In India, it's kind of the same thing. You're making about 300 rupees, and you're working in concrete yards or brick yards. And these are women doing very, very hard labor. And so being a seamstress is something that everybody wants to do, but you have to pay for the sewing machine and you have to pay for your training, which is about 3 years, and most people can't afford that. So what we do is we say, we're gonna pay for that, and we're gonna give you a life where you otherwise wouldn't able to have that. And then in South Dakota, the alternative to being an artisan is unemployment. The average family on the Rosebud Reservation makes $8,432 a year. 8 out of 10 people are unemployed. That means 8 out of 10 people wake up every day with nowhere to go. Imagine what that does to your self-esteem. If you have no one counting on you, if you've ever lost a job, think about what that does. That's heartbreaking. So we say that's not okay. Let's do something about it. You can tell the condition of a nation by looking at the status of its women. The first Prime Minister of India said that. When we uplift our women, we uplift an entire family, and that's how we uplift our nations. Our women are paying for their kids' school fees. If our women are employed, they can pay for their children to go to school, and that's how we break the cycle of generational poverty. So in Ghana by Grace, we work in the Upper East region. This is where I grew up. So we partner with the local church, and we have about 20 women that we work with right now, and also SIM missionaries that are on the ground there. So I communicate with them pretty much daily via WhatsApp. In India, we have a similar situation. We partner with Daughters of Hope in Bangalore and then Lions and Four in Kochi. And these organizations were already in existence before By Grace, but we just kind of came alongside their efforts. We found a lot of synchronicity and unity, and so we joined together to do that. And then in South Dakota, this we just started from the ground up last weekend, and we partner with the women's recovery shelter there called White Buffalo Calf Society to run our workshop and training for women. Help a woman earn her income and she will never be held down again. And this is truly what we believe. So these are some of our products. These are some of our skirts that we've made. We make primarily women's goods and accessories, and we incorporate a lot of the materials that are from the local markets. So the local saris from the India markets, the fabrics from the Ghanaian markets. We really think that it's important to use the materials that are in the local areas because one, they're absolutely beautiful, and then two, that also has an uplifting impact for them as well. So we're employing the women to make the goods. The women who are selling the zippers and the fabric, they're often women as well. So we have an impact, a greater impact on the community when we're able to purchase things from the local markets. So that's important. And the other thing is that it's not just about skirts, it's not just about kimonos, it's not about earrings, it's about creating a transaction where value is created for one person and dignity is restored for another. And that's a beautiful thing. And that allows people in the US to participate and really join together to form a sisterhood where we can work with each other and interact with each other in a really incredible way, in a way that's great for both parties. All right, so how we started. So my heart for this is really to take you through. I want to be totally authentic with you guys and kind of just share the journeys and the struggles of being an entrepreneur because it's really, really difficult. And it doesn't always look awesome, especially when you're starting out. So this is how I grew up. I grew up in Ghana, West Africa, in one of the poorest areas of the world. It's called the 1040 window. And it holds about 2/3 of the world's population and 85% of the poorest of the world's poor. And so I grew up among this, and it really changes your worldview and it changes the way that you look at things. My dad was out there, he was a civil engineer, and there was a problem with waterborne illnesses. And so he went out there to really solve the problem for that. And he built 100 hand-dug wells over the course of his time there, and really was just a servant to these people. He actually told me a story one time that I haven't ever forgotten, and he said it was on the 100th hand-dug well that a man came up to him and said, "I have had 5 children, 4 of them have died, because of water, because of this well, and because of your work, I have hope that my fifth one will live. That's powerful. You want to talk about making an impact? That's incredible. And people told my dad, his professor said, you're throwing your life away. You don't take this job. I mean, he was offered jobs everywhere. If you don't take this job, you're throwing your life away. And man, I think about that and I'm like, that is not throwing your life away. That's incredible. But my dad he knew that he was called to be, he knew he was called to be a missionary, and for 7 years, he worked in a government job before he went out there. And I think that there's always this period of waiting between where you are, where you know you're supposed to be, and that's always a very difficult time. But we look in the Bible and we look at some really, really awesome people. I mean, you think about David. He was told he was supposed to be king, and he had to wait 15 years until he was actually king. And so I really just want to encourage you that if you're in a waiting period or a waiting season, I've gone through it. I feel like I'm still somewhat in it, but God is in that so strongly, and he really wants to encourage your faith during that time because he's preparing you for what he's going to give you. And maybe that's in your character, maybe that's in your learning, but it's always a preparation phase, and God is with you in the middle of that. So that's important. I think everybody goes through that, and don't miss that, and don't think that, oh, I'm not where I should be. The waiting period is an essential part of it. And so don't give up during that waiting period. This is my mom. I mean, if you think my dad is great, just look at my mom. I mean, she is incredible. There's so many things about this picture that I just love and says so much about who she is as a person. But she actually worked in fashion design, and so By Grace is really a culmination of what my parents started. And that is the awesome thing about what you're doing now, is that what you do now will be passed on to the generation coming after you. And what my parents did now is being passed on through me and will be passed on. And so it's not just a one-time thing, it's a generational thing. And what we're doing here and what you're doing here matters. So my dad talked a little bit about, I was actually an entrepreneur at quite a young age. This was me making deals on 10 sheets. I don't know how else to say that, but I saw an opportunity and made a killing off of 10 sheets when I was little. And so I was like, yeah, I can do this. So the launch, we competed in the Asbury project, and we were like, all right, we're really going to do this. We're going to fly out to Africa. This is going to be great. We're going to start our workshop. We did. We got our dresses designed, and then we launched in January of 2015, and it looks so different from where we are now. It's incredible and just crazy to kind of see that. But so we launched in January of 2015, and I would just love to say that everything was incredible, but man, we could not have failed harder if we tried, you guys. Like, if we tried, I don't think we could have done a worse job. I don't. Like, there's so many things between the idea of something and then actually bringing that full through to execution. God is in the details, and the details are difficult. And so there's so many things that we just had no comprehension of, like zippers were falling apart, and like our dresses looked great from afar, but if you got super up close to them, you could see that there was a problem in the seams, and fit is an issue. And so it was like we had this great idea, and we wanted this to be awesome and change the world, and then we got our product, and we were like, this is just not going to work. So we had a bunch of issues. We had so many issues. We had issues with our product. Kelsey and I had started having issues because it's difficult when, and she was my best friend, and it's difficult when you are so excited with your dream, with your person, your team, your co-founder, and then what happens when that dream doesn't actually turn out the way that you want it to? It's really disappointing, and it's hard to deal with. And all of a sudden, you know, our relationship turned into, every time she would text me, it was always about something to do with business. And so I think it's important that just to be so vigilant to protect that relationship and really just keep perspective. that your relationships are more important than anything that you could do, any business, any amount of money. Your relationships are absolutely number one, and never lose that perspective, because where there is unity, God commands a blessing. And where there is discord, things fall apart. And so protect your unity, protect your blessing, because unity is everything. It's so, so important. And then we had logistics issues. I mean, I can't even tell you guys how many things we had to work through, like getting an accountant and a shipping broker. And Kelsey and I worked full-time jobs, entry-level full-time jobs. Never took a business loan. So we sacrificed a lot of our own money, and really funded by grace on our own accord. And so that was a very heavy sacrifice and really difficult to deal with at such a young age. But I remember someone telling me this while we were going through that time, and they said, the only way to fail is to quit. And that is so true. The only way to fail is to quit. And I think it would have been so easy for us to say, well, we tried it, didn't really work, let's just let it go. But when I wanted to quit, Kelsey wouldn't let me. And when Kelsey wanted to quit, I wouldn't let her. And that's why a team is so important. So we decided we're going to keep going. So at this time, we linked up with this missionary family, the Filas, who work in the slums in Bangalore. And they had the exact same mission as we do: educate, employ, and empower women. So we thought, we tried to do this on our own. It didn't really work out. Let's partner up with them, figure out how they're doing it well, fund their mission, which is essentially our mission as well, and then see what happens from there. So instead of quitting, we took a pivot, and we said, we're going to try this one more time, and we're going to give it everything we have, and we're going to do this. And it was a sacrifice. It cost us a lot, but we believed in it, and so we said, we'll do it. And we got these skirts, and they were beautiful. They were so beautiful. And we were so excited that we had a product that we were proud of. And at the same time, we realized that our clutches from Ghana were selling fairly well, and we could control the quality on them. So we thought, let's invest in our clutches. Those are going well, and then let's invest in our India collection. So in October of 2016, I'll never forget this, we applied for this competition, and we were notified by Randall Lane that we were a semifinalist in the 2016 Forbes Change the World competition, which I fell out of my chair because I just couldn't believe it. And I think you want to talk about unqualified, that was us. But it was so awesome is that God really qualifies you. And it was for the first time, I think it was somebody just breathed life into us and said, I believe in what you're doing. I believe in you guys. And so we got to go to the competition in Boston and meet these incredible world changers and people that are impacting across the world. And that's the awesome thing about this competition and areas like this, is that it's not really about the competition. It's who you're sitting next to. And it's who you talk to. Because when you talk to somebody else, they open up your mind so you can understand, oh yeah, that makes sense. I got to do it this way. And I can't tell you the things that we learned just sitting in the halls or talking to the people that we talked to were absolutely invaluable. So, and then in May of 2017, which was so recent, we entered this competition through the Rainier Venture Challenge in Kansas City. I sat in a classroom every Saturday for a couple months to learn some things about business that I knew I didn't know and I needed to know. And so from that, they had a competition, and 85 teams in Kansas City competed, and we went in there, and I thought, okay, well, if anything, we'll get the small prize, which is the social impact prize. Okay, so that'll be worth our time. It turns out, I still don't know how this happened, but it was okay, well, you guys made the top 40, So they cut it off at 40, and then we pitched all day, and they announced the 16 semifinalists. We made the 16 semifinalists. And I remember sitting in that room of 16 semifinalists. I mean, it was tech companies, like everybody, and we're a little nonprofit, just chilling. And I'm like sitting there, and you know how you look around the room and you're like, oh, they're way better than me. Oh, they've got it going on. You think that. And I remember thinking that. And man, you just got to push that voice aside and be like, no, I know I'm supposed to do this. God's called me to do this. I'm not going to look to the right or to the left. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. And so then we made it to the 8th, and then they cut it down to 4. We made it to the top 4. So then we presented, and I remember they were reading it off. So they announced 4th place, 4th place, I can't count, 4th place, 3rd place, 2nd place, and then 1st place, and they announced our name. And that was me. I just couldn't, my head was in my hands, because for the first time, it was just the most incredible feeling. I think after you've worked, and we worked for 3 years, almost 3 years on By Grace before that happened. And we were putting our own sweat and blood, our own money into it. And so for the first time, we were like, oh man, we have this as a gift, and it's such a gift. And so it was incredible. So where we are headed, this is By Grace Ghana, and these are some of our women that we work with out there. I am actually going out there in January for 2 weeks to spend some time with them and get to know them better. And like I said, we work with about 20 women out there, and I actually received this. Sherry helps us out. She's one of our missionaries that helps us out, and she talks with our women on a pretty frequent basis. And she said, these are 2 of our girls that we just brought on, paid for their education, and they're learning to be a seamstress. And she says, sewing has made me happy. My family will now say, our daughter learned something, and it will help us all. And I love that. This is Gifty, and she told us that before By Grace and before this program, that she was completely hopeless. And this was something that gave her hope to provide for her family. And this is Lardy, and she says, I can buy food for my family. And she's actually a widow, and she has like 3 kids. And so now she's able to provide for her family. And I see things like this, and I think this is why I do what I do. And I think why we do what we do is making a better life for somebody else. This is Sherry. She actually used to tutor me when I was really little, and now she moved out to Ghana full time, so she lives in Tamale where our workshop is, and she helps out with our operations. And then here are some of our women as well. For our holiday campaign and our holiday donation drive is really going to be to get a structure for them, because they're working outside, and because we have grown to a lot more women. And so when the rainy season comes, that's going to be a really difficult issue. And so we're going to try and get a structure together for them so that they're insulated and protected from that. This is By Grace India. We went there in August and met with our partners, met all of the women that we work with. They're incredible. It was awesome to do that. And we work in 2 different areas, Bangalore and then also Kochi as well, which are beautiful places. Then here's just a quick 30-second clip of our operations and our time out there. And then By Grace Rosebud. We launched this last weekend. Like I said in the beginning, there's 83% unemployment. The average family income is about $8,000, and women are abused very frequently. 1 in 3 is the reported rape rate, and in reality, it's more like 1 in 2. And as we were driving out to the reservation, I was kind of preparing. I looked up some pictures of what to kind of expect, because I knew it was going to be a completely different culture. Feels like a totally different culture, and it's still in the US. It's crazy. And my dad told me about a documentary that Diane Sawyer did on the Lakota people. And she went in there and she videoed them and spent some time with them. She released the video, and there was a lot of backlash from the tribe because of the way that it portrayed them. And when they backlashed, they said that their campaign was called More Than That. And they said, yes, we're poor. And yes, that's the reality of the situation, but we're more than that. And so going out to this tribe, we really looked through it with that lens. That yes, there's poverty, and it's important to understand the reality of the situation, but let's focus on the beauty. Let's find the beautiful part. Let's find where there's dignity and bring that up to the surface and bring that into focus. That's what we should be looking at, not at the poverty. And so when we went there, we really took that approach, and I got some samples made. We worked on a grant for almost 3 years. I had been talking to these women, and about 2 months ago, I'd been working on this grant forever, and nothing had happened. Then all of a sudden, I got word that it had been approved. And so it's just crazy, and it was such a testimony to me to just never give up and just to keep going, because you never know when something can come through. So we worked on these samples, and we actually have a lookbook that we include with all of our products, and I brought one of our lookbooks with us. Tammy had made these earrings, and she opened up the lookbook, and she saw these earrings portrayed in this manner, and she got tears in her eyes. And she couldn't believe that her products were portrayed in this way. And that was so powerful. I remember doing this photo shoot. It was like one of my friends was doing it, one of my friends was modeling. Like, it was hot, it was so sweaty, and it was just the worst. It was on Sunday, I was so tired, and I had to go back I work a full-time job on top of By Grace, and so I knew I had to go back to work on Monday. And then I was thinking about that, and then seeing that look on her face, I was like, man, it's all worth it. It's all worth it. And these are some of our other products as well. And here's a picture of the women that we're working with. That's my sister on the end. Bethany went with us as well. And it was an incredible weekend, and really, I think, the start of something very new. Here is a video that we have. It's a little bit longer. It's about 2 minutes, but it's one of the women. We work with a women's recovery shelter center, and so it's one of the directors kind of talking about the women that we work with and kind of the trauma that they're coming out of. And work is an important part of the rehabilitation phase. It's actually essential because it is restoring value for that person. One of the women told me that they sometimes will make these earrings. It takes about 5 or 6 hours to hand bead an intricate piece like this. And they will take them out just in the locally, and somebody will try and offer them $10 for these pairs of earrings. And they have to take it because they're so poor. And I thought, that is the most heartbreaking thing in the world. And that as the people of God, we're not going to try and find an opportunity to undercut somebody. We're going to say, you have something valuable to offer. Your time is valuable. Your skill is valuable. And so I'm going to pay full price so that you can be lifted up. And so one of the women, she's the executive director, she's talking about the healing process and the sage that they pick. Sage is a very healing part of their culture and something that they do very frequently. It's called smudging. And so we focused on that a lot. We thought that was so beautiful. The women go out to pick the sage, and it's a part of their redemption. And I think it's also a part of God hiding in that culture. He hides in this, he's in this ceremony and in this healing process there. So this is a little bit of what we experienced last weekend.
Look what the people use, plants and nature, and how we relate to the world. And how we relate to good and bad things that happen to us. So when we're working with women, whether they come to us in the shelter or we're responding to an emergency situation, we use the knowledge of the plants that were passed down through generations. And one of the plants that we like to utilize is sage. But we use sage in a way to expel any negativity or harm that's been done to somebody. So a lot of the women that we serve have suffered multiple traumas. And if they're coming to us for help, it's usually during an emergency situation where they have been beaten or maybe they've been raped. And so we use sage. It's not going to solve all of their problems, but it does have a very calming effect. We use it to help reduce anxiety. When someone is traumatized, their adrenaline is at a really high level, and so sage helps balance that out. If I have a woman who's been severely traumatized, I will take the sage and I will just rub down her body. Starting from her head, her hair, her back, her front, her arms, her legs, her feet. And why I do that, I just pray with her, and say, and ask Tugashula or ask our grandfathers or our relatives, to help give her strength, to remove some of the anxiety, to help her to be able to begin healing.
All of the women that were shown in those videos, or that video, are the ones that are making our items. So that's a really exciting, and they're actually going to be available soon, December 2017. We're going to have new products for Ghana, India, and Rosebud available at that time. We also have a new website that's launching, so we're really excited about that. For the longest time, we just used Squarespace, and I kind of did it all basically as far as design and programming, and so, well, not that much programming because it's done for you, but we are going to be moving to WordPress, and so I'm really excited about that. And then also new donation capabilities as well, where we're going to have the opportunity for people to give to specific campuses or specific needs that we have. So that is where we're heading. And to wrap up our time here, I'm just going to go through fairly quickly a couple of lessons that I've learned along the way that I really just hope encourages you guys. The first one is the quote that my entire life can be described in one sentence. It didn't go as planned, and that is okay. And I think that that's really awesome. I think just to understand that we don't have to be perfect, and that there's so much release in that, and you don't have to do everything perfectly. And really the mess is in the meaning is in the mess, and my story is greater and better because of the failure that we walk through. And I'm so thankful for that failure. I wouldn't trade it for anything. And also to pursue excellence and not perfection. I think that is something that's been weighing on me pretty heavily, is that the difference between the two. Perfection is doing everything right. It's how things appear and how others think that it's done. And then excellence is doing the right thing. That is the reason for what you do, and still doing the work when nobody's looking. And I think the distinction between the two is incredibly important because there's so much freedom in excellence. It's limitless and progressive. You can always be better. You're always going for more. You're always fine-tuning, where perfection can kind of just stifle you and choke you. And so living from that place of I don't have to be perfect, and that's okay. I'll be excellent. I'll do the best I can, and tomorrow's going to be better, and the day after that's going to be even better. And then when we make a mistake, our instinct is to run and hide. And I think that this is just as humans, this is what we do. And I think in business, if you haven't walked through failure or some kind of disappointment yet, you're going to. And I think at that time, you feel, oh, I just want to run and hide and shut the door and never see anybody again and just never tell anybody about this again. And I definitely feel like we had those days where it was really difficult. And something that I learned is that it's important during that time, instead of running away, to actually run towards the roar. And Levi Lesko, if you guys know who that is, he wrote this incredible book called Through the Eyes of the Lion. And he talks about this incident in nature that happens, and when wildebeests are at a well, the male lion will come up and roar, and the wildebeests, their instinct is to immediately run away and flee away from the roar. What they don't know is that the lioness is on the other side, and so as they are fleeing from the roar, they are actually running towards their death, towards the lioness. And the point he makes is this, is that when your instinct is to run away from whatever it is that you're facing, whether that's pain, whether that's guilt, whether that's shame, your instinct is to run away, but really what you should do is run into it and embrace it and lean into it. Because maybe, and this is what I have found, is that God wanted to teach me something, and he wanted to sharpen my character. And he wanted me to be a woman of honor and integrity. And so as you press in, your character grows. And that's where the beautiful part comes. So don't run away from it, run into it. Do good and become compassionate. This was written on the wall of the women's facility that we worked with in India. And it was on a different language, and so I asked the man, what does that mean? And he said, that's our language's translation of this verse. And it really stuck with me, because I was like, don't compassionate people do good? Isn't that how it works? We think feeling first and then action, right? But I think it's actually the opposite. I think that it's action first, and then your feeling catches up with you. And so I think a lot of people disqualify themselves from doing good in this world or participating in social impact ventures because they think that they're not compassionate enough or they're not a do-gooder. But I think that as you do the action, your heart somehow catches up with you. C.S. Lewis says this, do not waste time bothering whether you love your neighbor. Act as if you did. As soon as we do this, we learn one of the great secrets. When you are behaving as if you love someone, you will presently come to love him. And I think that's true. And then I found this verse that I love. It says, I want women to get in there with the men in humility before God. And that's awesome, because as women of God, we are called to take our place as well, and we are called to stand up and rise as well. Not primping before a mirror, chasing the latest fashions, but doing something beautiful for God and becoming beautiful doing it. And look at the way that he says that. He says doing something beautiful for God, action first, and then becoming beautiful doing it. Feeling catches up. And I think that's what happened in my life. And so I just want to encourage you, if you feel like I'm not compassionate, but you know that you should do it, that's okay. Do it. And then watch how your heart catches up with you. And now all of a sudden, 3 years later, you're like, man, I'm feeling compassion I never knew I had capacity for. Or empathy I never knew I had capacity for. All right, can I get an amen for this? I've got dreams, but I've also got bills. That is the realest thing, you guys. And I still work a full-time job. By grace is something I do in my spare time. So Kelsey and I both have big dreams, but we also have bills, and sometimes you have to walk through a season that is not fun. And as an entrepreneur, I think a lot of people will do that. And I think the crazy thing is I remember we get these illusions of people, and I remember meeting this girl, or seeing this girl on social media, and I was like, man, she's everything I want to be. She's killing it. She's just crushing. And then about a year later, in a crazy twist, I'm finding myself across from her, sitting down, having coffee with her, and she's asking me for advice. And all of a sudden, I realized she's just trying to figure it out too. She doesn't know. She thinks I know. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it out too. And so I think that that's the really cool thing, is that let's stop trying to be something we're not. There's so much freedom in that. And let's just be our authentic selves so that we can help each other and that we can learn from each other. And sometimes you will have those periods where you have the sacrifice. But there's this verse that I love that I came across, and it's in 2 Samuel. And this man, Arana, I'm not sure how to say that, said to David, "Let my lord the king take whatever he wishes and offer it up. Your majesty, Arana, gives this all to the king." David was trying to build an altar for God. And listen to what David says. This is incredible. This will change your life. But the king replied to Arana, "No, I insist on paying you for it. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing." Wow. What a heart is that? I will not sacrifice something to the Lord my God that cost me nothing. So as you are going through that period of sacrifice, as you're paying that bill that hurts to pay it, know that that is a sacrifice to God, and he sees that, and he sees what it costs you, and he's going to honor that. Martin Luther said, "A religion that gives nothing, costs nothing, and suffers nothing is worth nothing. The sacrifice gives it meaning." I am so thankful for the sacrifice. Keeping perspective, I wish somebody had told me this, and this seems so simple, but it's so true, and it's something I think I had to learn the hard way. But these three things, if you get them out of order, I got them out of order, and I felt like everything fell apart. It's so important to keep these things in order. First is God, and that includes God's house. That includes his church and his church family. Second is your people and your relationships, your team. Your team is more important than anything. And then third is your business. And as soon as those things get out of order, everything just kind of falls apart. So it's always important to keep perspective. God is first. Let's build God's kingdom. Let's build his house. Let's build his church. And then let's make sure that we're treating each other right, that you're treating your team right, that you're being respectful to your co-founder, that you're honoring your co-founder and your team. The simplest answer is the right answer. And I wish I had learned that a long time ago too. I think sometimes, you get into business, and by grace, there's so many different things, so many different ways that we could go. But the lean startup says, start with your MVP, your minimum viable product. Start as small as you can. Figure out whether or not it's working or how you could adjust that product with that minimal investment. And then once you find what's working, go with that. The simplest answer is often the right answer. And then finally, small drops of water make a mighty ocean. The world's view is that it only matters if it's big. It only matters if it's a huge movement and 1,000 people are having their lives changed. And it only matters if it's a huge, grand thing. And the kingdom of God is actually the exact opposite. And he says that there's so much beauty in the small. And I think that is so important and something that I have to keep remembering. Because even at Rosebud, there's so many times where, I was sitting there and I was like, man, there's only 4 women right now that we're training, and it's easy to get discouraged. You're like, this doesn't even matter. What am I doing here? But then it's important to remember this matters, because it matters to God. The small matters to God. And nothing great starts big. It all starts with the small. And I was on a phone call. I actually work in business development full-time at a national law firm. And I was on a phone call, and one of the attorneys, he's one of the most successful attorneys that we have in the firm, And we were talking about business development, and he said something that was so awesome. He said this yesterday. He said, a lot of people think in business that all you need is one home run. You need that one huge client, you need that one big business. But he said, often the reality of the situation is that you start by hitting a single, and then you hit another single, and then you hit a double, and then you hit another double. And then, little by little, you get there. And it's not that huge sweeping, oh my gosh, home run, yes, okay, $1 million, awesome. That's not how it works. I wish it did. But that's not how it works. And I think that that is important to realize. There's this verse that I love in Exodus, and God's talking to his people. And he says, when he's talking about overtaking the land, I won't get rid of them all at once, lest the land grow up in weeds and the wild animals take over. Little by little, I'll get them out of there while you have a chance to get your crops going and make the land your own. And I think that that's awesome because God is a God that always prepares us before he gives it to us. And little by little, as you move forward, you get more and more. And I remember I was standing with Bethany, my younger sister, who went with me to Rosebud last weekend, and we were outside. It was freezing. We were videoing the women in the sage, and I mean, you saw the footage. It was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. And they're going through a lot. And there's this moment where the wind is blowing Lisa's hair, and she's holding the sage, and it's just like there's restoration happening, and there's dignity happening for her, and that is so beautiful. I'm freezing by our car, and I said to Bethany, you know, we got to tour the women's shelter, and we work out of a small space called Her House. It's a great space. I love it. And I said to Bethany, man, I wish I just had $2 million and we could just redo everything and make it beautiful for them and I think their environment is important too. I mean, the place that they live in, I want them to have a beautiful space because some people don't know what that's like, and that's important to have like little lights and rugs where you walk in and you just feel disarmed and you feel comfortable. And that's important. And so I was saying, I wish I just had $2 million. I could redo it and decorate it and just make it a beautiful place for them. And Bethany turns to me and she says, but then you would miss the joy of building it piece by piece. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. She's 21, but she gets it. And it was just a reminder. Then you would miss the joy of building it piece by piece. And that is awesome. So as you're building your business, piece by piece, there's joy in that. And yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for having me.
Wow, thank you, Em. We really appreciate that. I get this call when she's on the Rosebud, and she said, Dad, now I finally know why people sell everything they have and go into ministry, because we see the effect it has on people. So she finally gets the joy of serving God. I'd like to try something here. This might be an Emily kind of thing. If you don't mind standing up for a second. And if you're okay that there's problems in this world, and if you're okay that we have no culpability and do nothing about it, then you can sit down. And if you're okay that we live in a context where we create wealth in our economy, we create business to create wealth, to bless people. If you're okay with just using that for yourself, then you can sit down. But if you're still standing up, I want to pray for you. Lord God, I thank you for each person here. I thank you for the example of Emily that's taking what she's been given and stewarding that in ways to bless you and to reveal your kingdom. Lord, look inside each of us as well. Help us identify the gifts and the abilities and talents you've given so that we can use them to reveal your kingdom, to be part of creating the healing, the shalom, the flourishing that you desire for your creation. Be with each of us, Lord, and guide us in directions that bless you and encourage others. We pray your continued blessing upon By Grace, this new line that comes out. We pray that it sells well, that these women are dignified and empowered, they get elevated, they draw close to you, and that you're glorified through it. We thank you for your promise that he who's begun a good work will complete that to the end. And as a result, we trust in you for good endings. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.